Now on the Hegseth vote. Today, the Senate will vote to advance one of the most unqualified, erratic nominees for a major position we have ever seen in America. No position in the cabinet carries the weight, the responsibility of Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense is in charge of keeping us safe and keeping the men and women in our armed forces and the civilians safe. So you need someone who's a steady hand. You need someone who's had experience in this kind of stuff. You need someone, when he shows up to a meeting, you're sure that he knows all the facts and is going to be able to conduct himself properly. If there's any cabinet that should be universally trusted and uncontroversial, it's the Secretary of Defense. Unfortunately, Mr. Hegseth is neither. He's neither trusted nor free of controversy, and I will strongly vote no. I want my colleagues to think about how absurd it is that this nominee has even made it to the floor. It's a shame that that has happened. We are being tasked to trust our armed forces to a man with a history of erratic behavior. One of the kindest words that might be used to describe Mr. Hegseth is erratic. And that's a quality you don't want as head of DOD. He has a history of excessive drinking, of alleged domestic abuse, and zero experience leading a large organization of any kind. The new allegations that came out yesterday are even more troubling. And people say, well, how do we know they're true? Well, first, the person who did it has no strike against her. But second, it just corroborates in an even worse way of what we've known about Hegseth in the past. He has a clear problem of judgment, as you've seen by his statements. It's like saying your heart surgeon has twitchy hands, but I'll let him do surgery on me. No one would do that. How on earth can America entrust our safety and security to a man who has allegedly shown up to work and other events inebriated? What if he shows up inebriated during a crisis? What's going to happen? This is dangerous. If confirmed, he'd be in charge of a workforce of over 3 million people, a budget of $850 billion. Where in his history that shows he's capable of doing that? And what if his erratic behavior spills over to his job at the Pentagon, a high-pressure job, and when people are having this behavior, usually high-pressure jobs make them more, not less erratic? What mystifies me so much about Mr. Hegseth's nomination is that there are so many other conservative defense leaders that President Trump could have nominated. People I wouldn't agree with maybe ideologically and on some of the issues that affect Secretary of Defense, but people who'd be capable of running the department. I know there are plenty of Republican senators who would instantly make a better option than Mr. Hegseth. Is Pete Hegseth really the best the Republicans have to offer? How low has this party come in making him the nominee? I don't believe he's the best. I don't believe he's close to the best. I will be voting with complete conviction, no. Given his history, confirming Mr. Hegseth is simply put a risky roll of the dice that Americans cannot afford, especially in such an important position. President.
Democratic leader.
I know I spoke a little while ago on Tulsi Gabbard, but I feel so strongly I just wanted to make one last plea to my Republican colleagues. In a moment, the Senate will vote to confirm Tulsi Gabbard as the next Director of National Intelligence. Every single Democrat, I am really proud to say, will oppose this awful nomination because we simply cannot, in good conscience, trust our most classified secrets to someone who echoes Russian propaganda and falls for conspiracy theories. It's hard to believe, of all the talented and capable people, that this is the person nominated. It's a person who has said things like the Ukraine invasion was caused by the United States, not by Putin. It's somebody who has denied Assad's use of chemical weapons despite all of the intelligence. It's someone who echoes Russian propaganda and falls for crazy conspiracy theories. I'd say to my Republican colleagues, please think once again about this nomination. This endangers our security. And my guess is, if a secret ballot were cast on Tulsi Gabbard, maybe she'd get 10 votes. You all know how bad she is. And so I know that people feel they want to please the president in his nomination. But there are certain times you have to buck and stand up and say, no, this is just a very bad choice for America. And the nomination of Ms. Gabbard is simply one of those. I plead with my colleagues, I know it's the last minute, to think twice, to vote no, as we all will vote, because this is such an awful nomination who will endanger our national security and our intelligence operations throughout the country and the world. I yield the floor. Absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President, last night, almost every single House Republican signed their names to what would be the largest Medicaid cuts in American history. The havoc, the damage that would do to tens of millions of American families would be almost unprecedented when it comes to Medicaid. Why did Republicans do it? So they could cut taxes for the billionaires club. The Republican agenda is quickly taking shape. Under Donald Trump's Republican Party, billionaires win, American families lose. Last night proved that Senate Democrats are right. It doesn't matter if Republicans go with one bill or two bills or 50 bills. The end game for Republicans has always been the same: cutting taxes for billionaires and forcing American families to pick up the tab. Now, the attention returns to the Republican Senate. Republican senators know these billionaire tax breaks are unpopular, particularly because it will push deep, nasty cuts to Medicaid. When I hear the Republican leadership talk about the bills they propose, they never mention the tax cuts to billionaires, which is the crown jewel in their minds of what they're doing. But they're afraid to mention it because they know how unpopular it is with the American people. They know it's going to increase the deficit by up to $5 trillion. These deficit hawks over on the other side of the aisle and the House are willing to increase the deficit by that much. So what do Republican Senate, what are they doing about it, knowing how high they would increase the deficit with rise in interest rates, rise in costs, risk of economic downturn? What do? Instead of facing the problem head on, they're resorting to budget gimmicks to hide the true cost of their billionaire tax cuts. They want to use something, some of them, called a current policy baseline. In essence, current policy baseline is an attempt to magically turn $5 trillion of deficit spending into $0 on their balance sheets. The deficit would still be there. It would still go up by $5 trillion in actual terms. But this sleight of hand, this hocus pocus, says it's not going to appear on a balance sheet because we're calling it current policy baseline. Congress, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative, has never used a current policy baseline for reconciliation, and for good reason. Any junior high school math student could tell you their current policy baseline gimmickry is utter nonsense. It's an attempt for Senate Republicans to hide the true cost of their billionaire tax cuts from the American people. At least House Republicans are being honest about the outrageous costs of their tax cuts in terms of the deficit. In fact, the House Freedom Caucus is being far more honest about the deficit than our Senate Republican colleagues. Maybe the Freedom Caucus should send those debt clocks that Representative Thomas Massie wears on his lapel to the Senate Republicans. Now, what happened in the House last night and what happened last week in the Senate is only the beginning. Democrats are going to fight these billionaire tax cuts tooth and nail. Democrats are glad to have this debate because the American people will be aghast when they learn what's really in the Republican tax bill. And that is tax breaks, huge tax breaks for their billionaire buddies, who are all doing well, God bless them. The last thing America needs is another tax break for them who are so rich already. Americans are worried that with these tax breaks, inflation is going to get worse. Americans are worried that Donald Trump will start a trade war with our allies and make trips to the grocery store an utter nightmare. We learned yesterday, for instance, that consumer confidence saw its biggest drop last month in 4 years. In 4 years. So this idea that the Republicans can hide what they're doing to the American people is not working. And we Democrats are going to make sure that Americans know exactly what they're doing in terms of their tax breaks for billionaires, hurting the average American. The issues that Americans are actually worried about are costs, are inflation, are getting decent health care. But what are the Republicans spending their time on here in Congress? Cutting taxes for billionaires and then hiding the true cost on the deficit with a sleight of hand. They're also slashing away at Medicaid and SNAP and so many other services that bring down the cost of living. This is absolutely not what the American people signed up for, and Republicans know it because they don't talk about it. Talk about how $2 trillion, close to $2 trillion in your plan, goes to the very wealthiest in America. You can't talk about it. You know why you can't talk about it? Because you know how unpopular it is. Yes, it's true that the small number of very wealthy people who have such a wealthy, greedy people, I might say, who want their taxes even lower, has a disproportionate hold on the Republican Party in the House and Senate. So they're doing it, but they're afraid to talk about it. And for sure, when it comes to these tax cuts, when it comes to the cuts in Medicaid, and so many other bad things that their budget does, Democrats will fight tooth and nail to prevent them. Yesterday, I said Pete Hegseth should be fired from his position as Secretary of Defense. In the short time that Secretary Hegseth has been on the job, he's already shown, no surprise to us, we said this at the hearing, that he lacks the judgment and character to lead America's national defense. What we learned yesterday regarding the information he shared on Signal is shocking. He sent very specific details about military plans over unsecured text messages. Yesterday's revelations were alarming, but they were not enough. We need answers, because more damage may have been done than the public and all of us know. That's why my colleagues and I are calling on the Trump administration to release the full, unredacted text conversation from this Signal chat, including everything communicated after the journalist prudently removed himself. We need to know if any senior national security official was using his or her personal devices. Ms. Gabbard's silence on this issue, when asked repeatedly in committee, was very, very troubling. And we need to know if there have been other sensitive conversations like this on unsecured channels. Senate Democrats across committees of jurisdiction are taking action. It's encouraging that both Ranking Member Reid and Chairman Wicker are calling for a DOD-IG investigation. Now, for the past day, the Trump administration has tied itself into knots about semantics. They're spending all their energy on what counts as classified or not, what counts as a war plan, an attack plan, and on and on and on. But that's utter nonsense. The plain fact is that if the Russians or Iranians or the Houthis had somehow known about these texts, if someone more nefarious than Mr. Goldberg had been added to the text chain, our troops would have been in danger. The mission would have been compromised. And once he got caught, did Secretary Hegseth take responsibility for his shocking lack of judgment, which is what he should have done. Any upright secretary, upstanding Secretary of Defense would have done that. Did he exhibit the kind of leadership Americans expect from the man who may deploy our troops into battle? From the man who may send our family members, our friends, our neighbors into harm's way? Did he accept that responsibility? Nope, he didn't. Instead of accepting responsibility, Secretary Hegseth attacked the journalist. Amazing. Amazing. It's like an Alice in Wonderland world, and called him deceitful. He pointed fingers, he blamed the liberal media, moaned about hoaxes. Mr. Hegseth, this is not a hoax. It's very real and very serious. You should not be in your job. I yield the floor and note the absence of the point. Now on reconciliation and SNAP. So the Republicans' so-called big, beautiful bill is one of the most heinous, callous, and cruel proposals we've ever seen. Republicans don't want to axe health care for 14 million Americans, which is going to mean higher costs for even many more millions of Americans. They also want massive cuts to SNAP, the largest, most effective anti-hunger program in America. Republicans want to cut SNAP benefits by as much as $310 billion, the largest cuts to anti-hunger funding in history. This would mean the average person on SNAP would be left with just $5 a day for food. That is morally bankrupt. $5 a day for food, when a dozen eggs alone costs more than that. Republicans are literally stealing food away from hungry kids, from seniors, from veterans, to finance tax breaks for the ultra-rich. Give me a break. This is cruel, this is mean, heartless, and counterproductive. A hungry child can't learn, often grows up to have a life that is not as productive as others who are fed can have. The Republican cuts to SNAP would cut 6 million Americans off from food. It would reduce food benefits for 5 million more Americans. 4 million children, 4 million children will go to bed hungry because of this cruelty to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. Isn't it incredible? I'd even like to ask these billionaires who are so hell-bent on reducing their own taxes if they're happy taking money away from hungry children and not feeding them. 11 million people will go hungry under the Republicans' bill, the biggest cut to food assistance in American history. That's the Republican idea of beautiful? Taking food away from the mouths of hungry kids, all for tax breaks for billionaires? It's not beautiful, it's ugly, very ugly. Republicans will continue to defend their SNAP benefit cuts, as Republicans will continue to defend their SNAP cuts as, quote, reducing fraud, waste, abuse. So ask them this. Ask our Republican friends this. Which category does a hungry 7-year-old fall under? Are they waste? Are they fraud? Are they abuse? What Republicans are really doing is increasing hunger, increasing poverty, increasing costs for states and families, lowering the productive lives that our future adult citizens can have, all to increase the wealth of the ultra-rich. It is shameful. It is sad. And finally, on the SALT deal. Yesterday, Donald Trump came to the Capitol to deliver a message to New York House Republicans. Back down on SALT or else. That is what he reportedly said, his words. Less than 24 hours later, we're learning that New York Republicans have all bowed to the king and caved in obeisance to Trump. New York Republicans are showing once again that their loyalty does not lie with the volunteer firefighter in Bayshore, or with the teacher in Riverhead, or even with the small business owner in Suffern. Nope, their blind loyalty lies with Donald Trump. The so-called SALT deal is a humiliating failure for New York Republicans. New York Republicans settled for barely half of what they wanted on SALT, and barely a fraction of what Trump ripped away from them in the first term. And they're doing it because they're scared of the president. And no relief for the marriage penalty. So if there's a firefighter and a teacher married to one another, nope, being married hurts them in the SALT deal the Republicans made. New York Republicans settled for SALT caps forever and a double tax on middle-class New Yorkers, our cops and firefighters, our teachers, our small businesses, our construction workers in the Hudson Valley, on Long Island, and across the state. I mean, even if New York Republicans did nothing, New York would be better off at the end of this year when the SALT cap would have expired. This SALT deal leaves in place a penalty for married couples. A couple who are paying both taxes face the same limit as a single individual, even if they're paying double the taxes. This is one of the biggest issues facing middle-class families, and New York Republicans are leaving it in place. It's barely 20% of the New York Republicans' own SALT bill that they wrote. One Republican congressman, Mike Lawler, said last year, quote, "Eliminating the marriage penalty within SALT isn't just important, it's absolutely essential," unquote. Well, clearly, it must not have been that essential. New York Republicans have said for months that they had one job they were sent to Washington for, to get rid of the SALT cap. With this SALT deal, so-called SALT deal, they have failed everyone back home. New York Republicans' capitulation to Trump on SALT is a slap in the face to Long Island, the Hudson Valley, New York City, and the hardworking middle-class families across New York and across the United States. I yield the floor. Reconciliation. A few hours ago, while most Americans were fast asleep, House Republicans rammed through their so-called big, beautiful bill through the House of Representatives. In the dead of night, in the hopes that nobody would notice, House Republicans took a bill that was already rotten to the core and made it even worse to appease the most radical factions of their party. It will bring deeper, harder, and even faster pain to the American people. It seems the hard right over there wanted even quicker pain. It's truly jarring to watch House Republicans cheer and pat each other on the back while bond markets spiral and working families are left to worry about how they'll make ends meet. So this morning, let's take a look at a few ways this bill has gotten even worse as it has reached final passage. We will surely learn more in the coming days, but let me share a few changes Republicans made that Americans deserve to hear. First, this bill was already the largest cut in Medicaid in American history, but now these cuts have been rushed forward and will happen as soon as next year. Moving up the timeline now means that hospitals, particularly rural hospitals, have even less time to prepare and increases the chance that they will close and that hundreds in each county will lose their jobs. Up to 14 million Americans are in danger of losing their health insurance. This bill will shut down rural hospitals, community health centers, urgent care clinics, and more. But while hospital beds are closing, Republicans are prioritizing a repeal on tanning bed taxes. And of course, at the last minute, the anti-choice radicals snuck in a new provision, penalizing enrollees in private plans on the ACA exchanges covering reproductive care. Defunding Planned Parenthood wasn't enough. The radicals got their pitchforks and added a provision to effectively ban every insurance premium on every ACA exchange for covering abortion. This is catastrophic and even increases the anti-choice provisions in the bill by a dramatic amount. It'll mean that nearly 1 in 7 Americans who have been insured through ACA since 2014 will be subject to this change. And while our communities get sicker, our kids get hungrier. Republicans weren't satisfied with simply making 4 million kids go hungry. They decided they needed to move up the timeline. Cuts to SNAP will take effect as soon as next year. That makes it even harder for food pantries to adapt. More chaos, more hunger, and more closures among our food pantries and kitchens that serve the hungry. Widespread hunger is now on a fast track. Republicans seem to be saying that the average person who needs food gets only $5 a day. A dozen eggs cost more than $5 a day. And that's the price Republicans accept so they can cut taxes on the wealthy. Republicans are stealing from hungry kids, stealing from low-income families to give trillions in tax giveaways to the wealthy. This is not beautiful, it's ugly, it's revolting. And as the bill proceeds, perhaps the most dramatic changes that occurred overnight is the surrender of America's clean energy future to China. Republicans are condemning Americans to higher energy costs and killing hundreds of thousands, even millions of good-paying jobs. Last night, the Republicans did something else too. They added a clean job kill switch. At the very last minute, Republicans added a provision that says any project that doesn't break ground within 60 days of this passage will lose the entire tax credit. That's getting rid of the tax credit. No project can start in 60 days. That's not how it works. They know that. They know that the clean energy tax credits are popular. They know that the clean energy tax credits will reduce costs for American families. So instead of saying kill it outright, they say you must start within 60 days. That is saying kill it outright. Everyone knows that. And I saw that some of the hard-right people from the oil patch states were gloating that clean energy is gone. It's one of the most devastating things added at the last minute in this bill, snuck in the dark of night. And we in the Senate, and I hope our Republican colleagues will join us in this, are going to fight this every step of the way. Much of the clean energy industry will be dead. As I said, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs will be lost. And China, 10 years from now, will be dictating what happens in our energy markets to our children. To make matters even worse, of course, the bill also raises taxes on some projects that are underway. Donald Trump says he wants America to dominate energy, and then he does this? Taxing energy projects, raising costs for families? Nope. Donald Trump, what you're doing is absolutely stupid and counterproductive. You don't even know what you're doing. You just think, oh, clean energy, let's get rid of it. We'll rely on oil, gas, and coal. Well, there ain't enough oil, gas, and coal to fuel the world, and it's more expensive to do it, Donald Trump. What the heck are you doing? This is an American energy kill switch. Jobs vanish in solar, jobs vanish in wind, manufacturing jobs go to China, just the opposite of what the president says he wants, and people's electric bills go up. So America, when your electric bill starts going up, talk to Donald Trump, talk to the Republicans in the House, and please talk to Republicans in the Senate and tell them not to move forward on this folly. Republicans call their bill a tax break, but in reality, it's a tax hike, a job killer, except for China, where it's a job creator. China wins, America loses. In the coming days, Americans will take a look at Republicans' big, beautiful bill and discover it gets uglier and uglier the closer they look. The bill hopefully has a doomed future in the Senate. Senate Democrats will let hell freeze over and fight this in every way that we can. Donald Trump told House Republicans that voting no on his bill would be the ultimate betrayal, but the real betrayal this morning was Republicans voting yes, a betrayal of the American people, because there's nothing beautiful about the biggest cuts to Medicaid in American history. Nothing beautiful about cutting SNAP benefits so children go hungry, can't learn or have productive lives. Nothing beautiful about cutting SNAP benefits by over $200 billion. Senate Democrats will oppose this morally bankrupt bill with every fiber in our being, every fiber. Now on reconciliation. What Senate Republicans will try to do this month is a travesty. They're picking up right where House Republicans left off, trying to ram through this chamber Donald Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. As the Senate returns to session, we do not yet have a text for the Republicans' mega bill, but make no mistake, the fight against this bill is ramping up today. It starts with Senate Democrats showing the American people what the bill actually is: one ugly bill. One of the most reckless, odious, and self-serving pieces of legislation we've seen in a long time. Today, I want to share broadly how Senate Democrats will fight this bill with every fiber of our being. It's going to be a long and drawn-out fight, but the American people deserve to see precisely how cruel, how vindictive, how ugly this big bill truly is. Case in point, House Republicans tucked into their bill a nasty provision that will restrict the power of judges to hold government officials in contempt. It's very clear that what's going on. It's very clear what's going on here. Republicans want to codify into law Donald Trump's attack against our judicial system. They want to make our courts toothless by nullifying their contempt powers and make it easier for the Trump administration to ignore the courts. This is nothing less than a naked attack against the separation of powers. If Senate Republicans include this authoritarian provision in their bill, Democrats will fight it tooth and nail. Will not stand by while Republicans try to sabotage our courts, and I fervently believe their effort will not win the day. Now, yesterday I also spoke with Leader Jeffries about how both chambers can work together to fight back against this bill. This Wednesday, Senator Klobuchar and I have also invited House Democratic ranking members to meet with our caucus and share firsthand insight from their fight in the House, including key Republican fault lines. In all likelihood, this bill will continue to undergo changes and get sent back to the House. For that reason, Democratic unity will be our strongest weapon as we defend the American people from harms contained in the bill. Our fight in the coming weeks, of course, is not just procedural. It's going to happen on every front, in committees, in public hearings, in the birdbath, online, in public, and here on this floor. The Republican plan is very simple: sell out working and middle-class Americans to line the pockets of the ultra wealthy and well-connected. And let's talk about the deficit. For years, Republicans screamed about fiscal responsibility. But now, Republicans are backing a bill that could add over $50 trillion to the national debt over 30 years. Even Elon Musk said this bill is a bad idea. That should tell you something. And most cravenly of all, Republicans are cooking the books so they can pretend their tax breaks won't impact the debt. Republicans are planning to use the Budget Chair's Section 312 authority under the Congressional Budget Act in an unprecedented and illegitimate manner to run roughshod over the Byrd Rule. The bottom line is this: Republicans' one ugly bill is a farce. It's betraying our values, it's a threat to working families, and it's a giveaway to the very few at the expense of the many. Senate Democrats will fight this bill in committee, on the floor, and in the court of public opinion every step, every day, and every possible way. I believe to my core that the American people, when they truly know what this bill is all about, if they see how shamelessly it enriches the wealthy and everyone else, the American people will reject it outright. Second, I'd like to take a moment and step back and share a quick word on the events of this weekend, the good and the bad alike. On one hand, this weekend we witnessed one of the largest peaceful demonstrations in American history. Nearly 5 million Americans took to the streets and made their voices heard against the rise of authoritarianism on our shores. I was proud to be one of them. We gathered in the streets, we gathered in front of state capitals, we gathered on beaches and in national parks and in cities and towns, big and small alike. For the most part, the demonstrations were peaceful. In some cities, there were acts of unlawful disruption, and those who broke the law should be held accountable. I've always been clear that the right to free speech is fundamental but must be exercised peacefully. But again, for the most part, the millions who marched this weekend did so peacefully. In many cities, there wasn't a single incidence of lawbreaking. In fact, the demonstrations were much more than just simply peaceful. They're inspiring. After all the attacks we have seen this year against our institutions and our values, it is so comforting to know that the roots of democracy run deep in this country. And even though we may disagree fiercely, the marches remind us we can stand up for our country and our democracy while still keeping the peace. What happened in Minnesota, however, should be a warning. Political violence is not just on the rise in America, it's becoming all too normal. And it falls on all of us to stop it. When lawmakers are shot in their own home, when a governor's mansion is set ablaze, when the spouse of the Speaker of the House is nearly beat to death, when a violent mob storms the U.S. Capitol, and when a gunman tries to assassinate the President of the United States, it is not enough to just condemn these acts and move on. We need to recognize something needs to change. Condemning violence is only the first step, necessary, but a first step. We must all work together to address violence's root causes. We must take a serious look at the toxic forces that are radicalizing too many Americans into embracing violence. Most of all, when violence strikes, the answer is for us to come together regardless of party. That's especially important for U.S. senators. Sadly, we didn't see that this weekend. I wish I didn't have to say this, but I was deeply disappointed and sickened to see a member of this chamber use the tragedy in Minnesota to take cheap political shots at the other side on social media and risk escalating a perilous moment. When the senior senator from Utah posted what the senior senator from Utah posted after the shooting was reckless and beneath the dignity of his office. For a senator to fan the flames of division with falsities while the killer was still on the loose is deeply irresponsible. He should take down his post immediately and apologize to the families of the victims. And this isn't even about politics. This is about simple human decency. Our divisions run deep, but we are still all Americans. We may disagree sometimes, many times, maybe most of the time, but we're still human beings. The victims this weekend, no matter what party they belong to, still leave behind kids who now will never speak to their parents ever again. So I say to my colleagues, now is the time to speak with moral clarity. Every single one of us must condemn political violence, no matter where it comes from, and to work together to eradicate its root causes. We cannot be silent, because silence only serves to enable more violence. And in the meantime, I will continue to work with Leader Thune, with the Capitol Police, the Sergeant-at-Arms, and all my colleagues to ensure the safety of every senator and our staffs. This is a dark moment for America, but I believe firmly in my bones we will endure. Thousands and thousands of people from the various groups to call their senators. We're doing everything we can to stop this bill because it's so horrible. Yes?
Senator Schumer, quick question. Eric Garcia with Independent. There are now House Republicans who are explicitly calling for Zohran Mamdani to be deported. They're calling for him to be denaturalized. What are your thoughts on Republicans making these kind
That's disgusting. Yes.
Senator, can you preview in as much detail as possible the amendments that Democrats plan to
Yeah, we're going to have amendments focused in 5 areas, not exclusively, but focused. One is the cuts to health care. The second is that it raises costs for Americans and at the same time loses lots of jobs. The third is how it gives huge tax cuts for billionaires. The fourth is corruption that the Trump administration's engaged in. And the fifth is the budget deficit. Not the budget deficit per se, as bad as that is, but it raises costs. It's going to raise your cost to buy a car, raise your cost to buy a home, raise your cost for a credit card. Thanks, everybody.
Senator Schumer, you're going to be endorsing.
Delays have piled up, and it's obvious large chunks of the Republican conference don't like their own bill. But of course, we're hearing that Republicans may still try to bring this legislation to the floor as soon as tomorrow. That's not real legislating. This is a total rush job. This is Donald Trump bullying Senate Republicans to get a bill passed, no matter what is actually in it. And this is Republican leadership perhaps daring their own members who are deeply worried about this bill to oppose it on the floor. So if Republicans do in fact proceed very soon, let me remind them about the consequences of passing this bill. It'll be a disaster for families, for the economy, and even for Republicans themselves. It rips health care from 16 million people. It's the biggest cuts ever to food funding. It raises energy prices and surrenders American energy leadership to China. And it rewards the ultra-rich. Republicans should abandon these destructive policies. But of course, they aren't doing that. Instead of fixing their bill, Republicans want to rush it because they don't want the American people to find what's in it. And their fears are certainly justified. Because the more and more that Americans look at this bill, the more and more they despise it. It steals their Medicaid, it jacks up their premiums, it takes away their jobs, and it gives trillions away to billionaires and special interests. This is a nonsense and destructive piece of legislation, and it makes no sense for Republicans to scramble to pass it. There's nothing inherently critical about July 4th. Even Donald Trump, 2 hours ago, admitted the July 4th deadline is a fake. And yet here they are, rushing, scrambling, twisting themselves into knots to try and salvage a bill they know will hurt both their constituents and their own political futures. Republicans aren't just lying to their constituents, frankly. They're lying to themselves, because this bill is wholly toxic. Here's what Republicans should do. They should not let Donald Trump bully them. They should hold firm and tell Donald Trump his big, beautiful bill is a disaster, a betrayal of the American people. Republicans should keep their own promises not to cut Medicaid. They should listen to the critiques of some of their own colleagues, like Senator Tillis, who reportedly said behind closed doors, "This will be devastating to my state." Or Senator Justice, who said, quote, "Our rural hospitals are going to have a tough time. You may have to hold your nose and vote for disagreeable policies." Senate Republicans should listen to their own words. They should ignore fake deadlines and stop the rush job. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Leader.
Mr. President, I want the American people to understand exactly what's happening right now with Senate Republicans and their so-called big, beautiful bill. Senate Republicans are trying to pull a fast one on the American people. For weeks, they've struggled with the reality that most people hate this bill. Leadership has struggled to secure votes among their own ranks who know how bad the bill is. And now they've scrambled to meet an entirely arbitrary deadline. So what did the Republicans do late last night? Hard to believe. This bill is worse, even worse, than any draft we've seen this far. It's worse on health care. It's worse on SNAP. It's worse on the deficit. At the very last minute, Senate Republicans made their bill even more extreme to cater to the radicals in the House and Senate. Republicans are about to move forward with a radical 1,000-page bill just made public in the last several hours without knowing how many trillions it will cost. They don't even want to know a CBO score. They're afraid to show how badly this will increase the deficit. On this bill, a major bill that affects every part of American life, hiding the CBO scores, in defiance of their own promises to cut the debt. Deficit hawks out there on the Republican side in the House and Senate. This bill makes the debt worse and the deficit worse, even worse than before. Generations, future generations will be saddled with trillions in debt. Debt is abstract, but what does it mean for the average American? Raising your costs to buy a home, raising your costs to buy a car, raising your costs on credit card bills. And why are they doing all this? Why are they doing the biggest Medicaid cuts in history? Now it's getting close to $1 trillion just in Medicaid alone. All to cut taxes for the ultra-rich and special interests. And they did it while most Americans were asleep. It is astounding that this is the product Senate Republicans have come up with. Because for weeks, they kept saying they were going to somehow strengthen Medicaid, that they'd moderate, quote unquote, the House clean energy cuts, that nobody would lose benefits. Well, all of that has gone out the window. Those supposed moderates on the other side are falling like dominoes, ready to move on a bill that does precisely the opposite of what they claim. Many Republican senators have admitted they're not happy with this bill. One said it will take away health care from working people, and yet there's still a yes on this bill. If Republican senators are not happy with this bill because they know how badly it hurts their constituency, they should vote no. After all, they're United States senators. They have the power to vote however they want. Did they forget that was an option? Are they all so afraid that they can't do what they know is the right thing for the American people? Just incredible, incredible. After weeks of hemming and hawing from Republicans, the bill they are ready to proceed with is the most extreme version of their bill yet. I guess when push comes to shove, leave it to Republicans to cave to their hard right flank. Under this draft, Republicans will take food away from hungry kids to pay for tax breaks to the rich. All the data shows Democrats don't like it, independents don't like it, and Republicans don't like cutting SNAP, taking food away from kids, all to pay for tax breaks for the wealthy. The SNAP cuts, and I'm sure we'll hear from Senator Klobuchar shortly, are every bit as bad as in the House, the worst in history ever. Those cuts are cruel. Those cuts are un-American. But it's what Republicans are getting ready to do. Meanwhile, Medicaid, where they've had so much controversy and back and forth, Medicaid will be fed to the sharks under this bill. In fact, we just got the news that CBO said the Medicaid cuts in this version are worse than any version of the Republican bill to date. Nearly $1 trillion in cuts, just to Medicaid alone. And there are more cuts for ACA and Medicare. Let me repeat. This version of the bill cuts nearly $1 trillion in Medicaid alone, worse than any version we have seen so far. $930 billion to be precise. And that does not count the many billions and billions and billions more in cuts to ACA and Medicare. Far worse than anything we have seen so far. The tiny tweaks that Republicans made to provide the provider the provider tax will still decimate state budgets and do nothing to protect hospitals in the coming years. And what about the rural hospital fund Republicans have spent the last few days touting? It's a drop in the bucket. This rural hospital fund is a fig leaf. It's like putting a Band-Aid over an amputation and sending the patient home. When the rural hospitals start closing, just remember, the residents of those hospitals, the people who work in those hospitals, it's because of these cuts and no other reason. Rural hospitals, many of them will close. This Band-Aid ain't enough to cover even a small percentage of them. And healthcare cuts will go up for healthcare costs will go up for everyone, even if you don't have Medicaid, even if you don't have ACA, even if you don't have Medicare. Your private insurance will go up dramatically, every month. People hate paying those health insurance premiums. They're going to pay a lot more under this bill. And why are they doing all this? Why are they doing all this? We know why. Tax breaks for billionaires. Tax breaks for billionaires. And now, let's talk about another subject. The clean energy changes Republicans made last night. Frankly, I don't think even most Republicans realize just how radical these last-minute changes are. They are drafted to do one thing, to kill all wind and solar. All wind and solar. Solar, the cheapest way to produce new energy, the quickest way to produce new energy. We need more energy. AI is going to take up a lot of energy. If we don't have new sources of energy, all new sources, guess what? People's electricity bills will go up and up and up. When it comes to clean energy, the Republicans basically reverted and somehow exceeded the extreme policies that came out of the House. For days, they worked to modify those provisions, many Republicans, to make them less bad. Now they're made even worse. And these are policies, by the way, plenty of Senate Republicans said they were going to change. Under this new draft, clean energy projects in wind and solar will now need to be placed in service, not begun, in less than 2 years from now in order to qualify for a tax break. And the provisions related to Chinese involvement, which of course we want to fight against China, but the best way to fight against China is have a robust solar industry. China's going to run the whole solar industry for the world. And if you think they're not going to make Americans pay more as Chinese customers pay less, forget it. But anyway, on the provisions related to China, they made them almost unmanageable. It's going to kill nearly every wind and solar project out there because the standard is laughably unrealistic. What does it mean? Projects already in the works will shut down. It means that people will lose their jobs. It's estimated 840,000 jobs. Add that to the healthcare jobs. Wow. Americans will pay hundreds of dollars extra a year on electricity as soon as the next year. Thanks to the Senate Republicans caving in to big oil, it will be China, not the United States, that will likely becomes the world leader in energy production in the years to come. Self-destructive, needless, harmful to both our economic and national security. And it just shows how tight big oil's grip is on Senate Republicans. Remember, 80% of these clean energy investments, my colleagues, have gone to Republican districts. The investments support, as I said, over 800,000 jobs. Republicans are so beholden to the fossil fuel industry, they'd rather kill jobs in their own communities than upset the big oil lobby. Disgusting, shameless, and done, of course, while most Americans were asleep. So again, Republicans are trying to pull a fast one on the American people. Republicans are pulling a fast one even on their own members, and certainly on their own constituents. This will hurt the reddest of states badly. If Republicans proceed, Senate Democrats will hold them to account. We'll gear up for another night of vote-a-rama very soon. We'll expose this bill piece by piece. We will show how it cuts health care, raises costs, rewards the ultra-rich. We welcome this debate. And if Republicans proceed and follow Donald Trump over the cliff, with this bill tied to their ankles like an anvil, they will not only doom their own communities, they will doom their political fortunes, their own political fortunes, and have no one to blame but themselves. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum. Good afternoon. Today, Senate Republicans betray the American people and cover the Senate in utter shame. They betrayed the American people and covered the Senate in utter shame. In one fell swoop, Republicans passed the biggest tax break for billionaires ever seen, paid for by ripping away health care for millions of people and taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids. This is not a big, beautiful bill at all. That's why I moved on the floor to strike the title. It is now called the Act. That's all it's called. But it is really the big, ugly betrayal, and the American people know it. This vote will haunt our Republican colleagues for years to come. Because of this bill, tens of millions will lose health insurance. Millions of jobs will disappear. People will get sick and die. Kids will go hungry, and the debt will explode to levels we have never seen. Also that the billionaires and corporate special interests get a permanent tax break. This bill is so irredeemable that one Republican literally chose to retire rather than vote yes and decimate his own state. But there were many, many senators who felt like he did. They knew how bad it was for their states, but they didn't have the courage, they didn't have the backbone to vote with the people of their states. They voted in obeisance to Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies because, as one of the senators said, we are all afraid, speaking of the Republican senators. One other thing of note, after the back and forth we saw the past 30 hours, those backroom deals, sweetheart negotiations, we found out that Senate Democrats successfully fought a provision that the Senate Republicans were using to try and get Senator Murkowski's vote. The Medicaid provision in question was a handwritten parenthetical notation, not even disclosed to the Dems, that created a special new preference for Alaska. We fought and we won. This is a polar payoff, and it should not have stood, and it didn't. And let me say this. On the Republican side, when the bill passed, there was a bit of somberness that I don't think was expected. And that's because they knew deep in their hearts how bad this bill is for them, their states, and the Republican Party. They knew that following Trump would be a very, very bad move for the country and for the Republican Party. When people start losing their Medicaid, when they start losing their jobs, when their electric bills go up, when their premiums go up, when kids and parents lose SNAP funding, the people of America will remember this vote. The American people will remember the Republican betrayal. And Americans will pay the price for this perfidy for generations. Generations. So, we Democrats fought very, very hard. We won a remarkable number of cases with the parliamentarian over and over and over again. We broke through with the American people, who by a 2-to-1 margin don't like this bill. And because of our relentless focusing on a simple, unified message, billionaires win, families lose, that the Republicans are taking away your health care to give a tax break to billionaires, it has sunk in with the American people, and it will remain. And our battle is not over. We're going to be fighting in July and August and throughout the year, reminding Americans when their hospitals close, when their health insurance is cut off, when their friends lose their jobs because clean energy has been so decimated. They'll remember. They'll remember. We will make sure of that. Questions? Yes. Last night, while Americans were asleep, Senate Republicans gutted critical funding for local TV and radio, for foreign aid that keeps America safe, all to keep paying for their billionaire tax cuts. On the very same day that communities in Alaska turned to public radio and TV for tsunami warning updates, Republicans in Washington voted to take that funding away. It is senseless, it is cruel, and just defies common sense. The Republicans have become the party of cut, cut, cut now, ask questions later. Cut health care for 17 million Americans, cut food assistance for hungry kids, cut good-paying energy jobs, let Beijing get ahead of us. Never mind the kids will go hungry, or that families will lose insurance, or that people will get sick and die. Make no mistake, make no mistake. Just like with the big ugly bill, the more Americans learn about what Republicans just did in this rescission package, the more they won't like it, and the more Republicans will squirm. We saw a lot of squirming last night. When parents see Republicans just axed educational programming, when people see Republicans just axe Sesame Street to pay for tax cuts to billionaires, when rural Americans see Republicans not just betrayed them and defunded public radio, sometimes the only source in rural areas so vital to natural disasters, and it's the only news source there, the consequences will be severe. Americans will remember. Democrats will ensure that they don't forget. We will make sure Americans don't forget what Republicans are doing, just like we are doing with the big ugly bill, just like these taxes for billionaires, just like these massive Medicaid cuts. Last night's vote axing PBS, axing local TV will haunt Republicans as the damage sets in. Today, tomorrow, next month, next year, Americans will be talking about these cuts at their diners, at the grocery store, at dinner, at the park, because the cuts will be felt everywhere. Because here's what Americans don't want. They don't want Republicans to rubber stamp DOJ's awful and damaging cuts. No questions asked. Republicans never seem to challenge Donald Trump or DOJ or vote. When you cut investments that actually make people's lives better, when you cut those investments like health care, local TV, education, people get angry. So make no mistake. When Donald Trump and Republicans rammed the big ugly bill through, Americans quickly saw how Donald Trump and Republicans betrayed them, and their popularity is already declining. When families saw the consequences, when Americans saw the Medicaid cuts, when kids are getting food ripped from their mouths so billionaires can pay less in taxes, it is disastrous for Donald Trump and many Republicans. And we saw that on many faces across the aisle last night who didn't want to do what Trump wanted them to do, but were forced into it because of threats or frailty or fear. Well, the same thing has happened as I speak. Democrats are fighting in the Appropriations Committee to unwind the awful DOJ cuts against veterans. And that's what's happening to our veterans. And that's just what's happening to our veterans through these DOJ cuts. What's happening to them is terrible. Our veterans, these are the people who volunteered, who risked their lives. Many of them came back with injuries and PTSD. And when they get to the veterans' hospitals, because there have been such cuts, their care is inadequate. They risk their lives for us, and Republicans and Trump and DOJ cut veterans' health and veterans' care. It's outrageous, outrageous. And they're doing it. We've got a lot of verbiage. Oh, we love our veterans. And then they cut what our veterans need and want. The meeting today in the Appropriations Committee shows that there's a way Republicans can undo these awful DOJ cuts. Reversing DOJ cuts through the Milcon appropriations bill today is a direct rebuke to Donald Trump. It's saying to Trump, we don't like what you did, but we'll see if Republicans come along, if they will defy Trump and vote to undo the DOGE cuts. It's simple. Republicans have a choice to make as we move forward. They can put their constituents over Trump and work with Democrats to continue funding the government in a responsible way, or they can continue to go it alone and continue to bow in obeisance to Donald Trump and rubber stamp his awful cuts that do such harm to our Americans in uniform. And if they go it alone, without undoing the terrible things that DOGE did, here and elsewhere, Democrats will make them pay a price, just as we have made them pay a price on reconciliation. Republicans can continue to bow in obeisance to Trump and rubber stamp whatever cuts he tells them to make. But you can't just push these awful cuts farther and farther down people's throats and not expect them, the people, to respond. Republicans, for their own good and for the good of the country, need to be careful about making so many devastating cuts so quickly and just on a party line vote in reconciliation and rescission and whatever else they might come up with to avoid the process. And if Republicans keep going down this road, if they choose to ignore the bipartisan process, if they keep reneging on funding agreements reached in committee, if they prefer to strike deals with Donald Trump and Russell Vought, to use impoundment, rescissions, and pocket rescissions to cut whatever they want on a party line vote, the harms to the American people will be devastating. It will be devastating in health care. It will be devastating to our farmers. It will be devastating to our veterans. It will be devastating to the millions of people who were promised jobs in health care and clean energy. It will be Americans back home who will see even more cuts as they proceed on this road, if they do. More cuts to housing, more cuts to education, to research, to economic development. It'll be our farmers who see their costs go up. It'll be our small businesses who get taken advantage by special interests and by erratic tariff policies. The consequences for this chamber and our country will be stark, very stark indeed.
Without objection.
Mr. President, while Senate Republicans have been focused on pushing partisan politics that would crush middle-class Americans, all to pay for tax cuts for billionaires, while House Republicans are ignoring their responsibility to fund the government by leaving town early for the Epstein recess, and while the Trump administration continues to push policies that are sending costs up, chaos up, corruption up, Senate Democrats and House Democrats, myself, Leader Jeffries, and both of our caucuses are fighting to build a new vision for America. I'm working closely with Leader Jeffries alongside Senators Klobuchar and Congresswoman Dingell on a united vision. The American people are fed up with costs, chaos, and corruption of the Trump administration and the aiding and abetting Republicans have done at his behest. Republican policies have sent the price of groceries, housing, utility bills, essential goods, and more skyrocketing. They have gutted health care and essential services for working families like Medicare and Medicaid. They've spiked health care premiums and put hospitals around the country in a crisis mode. Many are talking about closing. A few have already closed, leaving people without the health care they need, all for tax cuts for billionaires. They have unleashed rampant levels of corruption and warped our democracy, empowering the wealthy and well-connected to profit off the backs of working families. And Donald Trump seems to be at the top of the list, using his government position to make personal profit. But Senate and House Democrats are fighting back. Democrats are fighting to lower the high costs of living, which have become far too expensive for American families. We're fighting to strengthen our communities, make our streets safer, and protect essential services that millions of people rely on every single day. Instead of further breaking our health care system, ripping health care away from millions, we think the health care system should be easier, not harder, for Americans to access and navigate and to afford. We're also fighting to fix our broken health care system to make sure that people who need the care can get it and be able to afford it. We're fighting to rid our government of the scourge of corruption. There's so much corruption and self-dealing and rich people, billionaires getting richer in terms of how they operate and what the government passes and doesn't pass. We're fighting to rid our government of that scourge. It's run rampant. The scourge of corruption has run rampant under Donald Trump and Republicans. It's one of the most corrupt administrations in American history. The bottom line is this. Senate and House Democrats are united in creating an America that works better for everyone, not just the wealthy, not just the well-connected. And we will use every tool at our disposal in the appropriations process and beyond to fight back against the disastrous Donald Trump Republican agenda.
Chair recognizes the Democratic leader.
Mr. President, I just want everyone here and in the country to understand what our Republican colleagues just did. For the third time this year, Republicans just resorted to the so-called nuclear option in the Senate, weakening the Senate even further and turning this chamber into a conveyor belt for unqualified Trump nominees, a conveyor belt for unqualified Trump nominees. Make no mistake, this move by Republicans was not so much about ending obstruction as they claim. Rather, it was another act of genuflection to the executive branch. Democrats have shown very clearly we're willing to negotiate. We did that at the end of the last work period. We were doing it today. But what Republicans have done is chip away at the Senate even more, to give Donald Trump more power and to rubber stamp whomever he wants, whenever he wants them, no questions asked. That is not the Senate's job. We're supposed to debate and take votes on nominees, especially when the executive branch is grossly breaking norms by sending us woefully unqualified, unscrupulous, and in some cases deeply dishonest individuals for powerful and important positions. By going nuclear today, Republicans are saying we don't want to do our jobs. They're saying whatever Trump wants, we'll do it. Make no mistake, because of the harmful step Republicans took today, the historically bad nominees Donald Trump has sent to the Senate all year long will get even worse. Republicans now own, even more than they had before, the terrible nominees that are about to sail through this chamber. The special interests will get even richer, and the American people will be the ones who are hurt the most. This is a sad, regrettable day for the Senate, and I believe it won't take very long for Republicans to wish they had not pushed the chamber further down this awful road. I yield the floor.
Chair recognizes the Democratic leader.
Tomorrow, the Senate will hold votes on two bills. The status quo continuing resolution from the Republicans, which will lead to a shutdown, and the Democrats' plan to prevent a shutdown while avoiding a catastrophe in rising health care costs. Tomorrow, Americans will see the glaring contrast between the Republican plan continuing the status quo of Donald Trump's health care cuts and high costs, and the Democratic plan to avoid a shutdown while lowering premiums, fixing Medicaid, and protecting funds for scientific and medical research. The latest studies, in fact, show that the impacts of the Republican health care cuts are quickly getting worse and worse than first imagined. This is an oncoming train that must be stopped. So tomorrow, Republicans can choose: either listen to Donald Trump and shut the government down, or break this logjam by supporting our bill and keeping the government open. The votes tomorrow will tell all. I yield the floor. The fact that the House adjourned until October 1st, that shows you it's clear evidence that they want to shut down. We don't. Yes?
Do you think that your decision in March to basically not get much in return for avoiding a shutdown then made it easier for them to make this play call now and say, let's just do a straight CR and make them eat?
Absolutely not. First, as you saw, the only bill that got a majority of those voting was our bill, not their bill. But second, the world is totally changed from March. First, people have seen the damage the Republicans are doing. The reconciliation bill just decimated health care. Tariffs are now in effect and raising people's costs. Their costs are going up left and right. So they're very, very unhappy with what is happening. Second, we Democrats had plenty of time to be prepared. Our message has been the same for the last 2-3 months, which is we need health care. We need to restore Americans' health care, and we need to get down their costs, and we don't need them to break the law and undo anything the Appropriations Committee did. And third, we have seen the unlawfulness of the Trump administration after March, with the rescissions, with the impoundments, with the pocket rescissions. So the world's a different place right now. Yes?
What's your plan now that this bill is failed?
We want to sit down and negotiate. I think it's clear when you look at the votes on the floor of the House, or the Senate rather, that a negotiation is the only way to avoid a shutdown. We want to do it. So far they don't. We hope they change their minds. Yes?
The president feels like he's pretty comfortable with his position here because you all are asking him to add something to the CR. Why do you seem also very confident that Republicans are going to be the ones who are blamed for this?
Absolutely.
You're taking the votes against the continuing resolution.
No, the bottom line is that they, by not negotiating, are causing the shutdown. And that is plain. And as I said before, when we had the majority, we negotiated with them, there was no shutdown. They're in the majority, they don't negotiate, they cause the shutdown, plain and simple. And what they did today by adjourning the House October 1st, it's becoming clearer and clearer to Americans, they want it. Yes?
Yeah, Senator Schumer, a lot of the complaints from the Democrats today sound very much like the Republican complaints in 2013 heading into that shutdown. They were insisting on negotiations over health care. They wanted to roll back the ACA. Obama said he wouldn't negotiate. We ended up with a 60-day
Here's what's
shutdown.
different.
What's different?
They were taking something away. We're trying to restore something that they took away. It's a world of difference when you're trying to do some good from people rather than doing negative stuff for people. Okay? Yes?
Why can't you negotiate these healthcare provisions after, separate? You know?
We've been asking for months to do it. Why not do it now? People are hurting. Jobs are being lost. People are getting notices that their health care premiums are going up. People are losing health care. Do it now. There's no reason not to do it now. Let's do it now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we met with the president for the first time since all of these issues started, even though we have requested repeated meetings with Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, and the president. We have very large differences on health care and on their ability to undo whatever budget we agree to through rescissions and through impoundment, as well as pocket rescissions. And I think for the first time, the president heard our objections and heard why we needed a bipartisan bill. Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not. We've made to the president some proposals. Our Republican leaders will have to talk to him about them, but ultimately he's the decision maker. And if he will accept some of the things we asked, which we think the American people are for, on health care and on rescissions, he can avoid a shutdown. But there are still large differences between us. See the charts? You guys see the charts?
No, yeah.
I know you guys
I was
did.
gonna say, yeah, we see them.
Should we make them bigger? Okay, first, well, we just heard that Speaker Johnson said the House is out again. Johnson and House Republicans care more about protecting the Epstein files than protecting the American people. And the bottom line is, today we saw the Republicans run the same play and they got the same result. The question is, will they change course? The votes aren't there. It's clear from today's vote and yesterday and 2 days ago's vote and the 2 other votes before it. So the bottom line is we've had 4 votes and they haven't gotten the votes on any of them. We have asked Republican leaders for months to sit down and talk to us, talk with us. They've refused and barreled us into a shutdown. They thought they could bludgeon us and threaten us and scare us. It ain't working because my caucus and Democrats are adamant that we must protect the health care of the American people. And so now, rather than working with us to end the pain Americans are feeling because of a shutdown, Republicans have instead, they've wasted a week, refused to talk, and exacerbated pain for America. Instead of trying to come to the table and negotiate with Democrats and reopen the government, the White House and fellow Republicans have vowed to make this a maximum pain shutdown, they call it. Unfortunately, the maximum pain falls on the American people, and the American people know it. They know it's not Democrats doing this maximum pain. It's vote and Trump and the Republicans. And so it falls on them. And so even in the White House and in the administration, there are people saying, don't do it, because the blame correctly will fall on Trump's shoulders. They're using the American people as political pawns. Why? Because they don't want to even talk to us about reopening the government by fixing health care. Based on vote? Look, after five failed votes, it should be clear to Republicans that we cannot go forward unless they sit down and seriously negotiate with Democrats to address the health care crisis. It's that simple.
Do you know what Donald Trump was referring to when he said he'd been speaking with some Democrats?
They later, as I understand it, he has not been speaking to any Democrats.
A poll came out from CBS News that found only 48% of Democratic voters believe what you're fighting for is worth a shutdown. If you don't have a majority of your party, how do you continue?
Look, all I can tell you is the American people feel very deeply about solving this health care crisis. Every poll we have seen shows they want us to do it, and they feel that the Republicans are far more responsible for the shutdown than we are.
What about these threats to, do these rifts or layoffs? Like, they're still threatening them.
Yeah, the bottom line is that the American people know if they do layoffs, if they do rifts, it falls on Donald Trump's shoulders. He's doing it, not Democrats, and the American people know that.
Do you have concerns that...
Is there any plan?
On Argentina, if Americans want to know just how little Donald Trump seems to care about their health care, look at what he's doing today in the Oval Office. As we speak, the administration is approving $20 billion in taxpayer dollars to bail out Argentina in the middle of a shutdown. I have just one question. If this administration has $20 billion to spare for a MAGA-friendly foreign government, how can they say we don't have the money to lower health care costs here at home? The overwhelming majority of Americans say we need help with our health care, and they're busy spending $20 billion because Trump seems to really like the leader of Argentina. They're both sort of MAGA types. The administration is giving this money away to help Argentina's hard-right president in his election, where his party is in serious trouble. It's a bailout, it's nonsensical, and at the same time, the American people are frightened, scared, worried about losing their health care. It makes no sense to give money to Argentina and then say we don't have enough money to help Americans with health care. It is so against what Americans want. I'm sure if we had a vote here in this country, it would be 99-1 almost that the money belongs here. And that's what we should be focused on. Meanwhile, farmers across America are looking at this Argentina bailout on one side and wondering whose side the administration is on. It's been a devastating year for our soybean farmers because this administration has bungled trade talks with Beijing, and as a consequence, they've killed our soybean exports to that country. Now China is looking precisely to Argentina to cut new soybean deals, while our farmers at home suffer backbreaking losses. And on top of all that, you mean to tell me the administration's fine sending $20 billion of taxpayer dollars to help foreign farmers compete against American farmers here at home in the middle of a shutdown? It's insane, utterly insane. This Argentina bailout is a slap in the face to both American farmers and to working families worried about keeping their health care. So I'll say it again. If this administration has $20 billion to spare for a MAGA-friendly foreign government, they cannot turn around and say we don't have the money to lower health care costs here at home, because those costs are going through the roof. Now, I want to close by speaking briefly on an extremely disturbing report I just read in Politico. Earlier today, Politico published a story purporting to show thousands of private messages containing racist, sexist, and violent comments from young Republican leaders across the country. The leaked conversations are revolting. They make you want to throw up. They include comments supposedly from young Republican leaders saying things like, quote, "I love Hitler." Can you believe it? They include gas chamber jokes. How sick. They include racist obscenities, including the N-word. They include jokes about sexual assault. Many of these individuals who have allegedly made these comments have positions of leadership in the young Republican organization. It's hard to believe. You can't make this up. And it's awful. It's revolting. It's disgusting. It's obnoxious. It's the kind of garbage the worst kinds of people say when they think no one is watching. If this report is accurate, every single Republican leader, from President Trump on down, including every Republican senator, including the Republican National Committee, ought to condemn these comments swiftly and unequivocally. And the people should no longer have any position of power in any Republican organization. People who said it. At this delicate political moment, Mr. President, party leaders of all sides have an obligation to speak out against this kind of violent and vile rhetoric. Republicans, leaders cannot be silent if these sickening reports are true. I yield the floor.